Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and today it's time to talk to Eve Lorgen again. Our subject will be narcissistic abuse, and especially in cults, and we will also focus on the question, why in the hell do we fall for cults time and again? So, welcome back, Eve. Very good to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm good. It's springtime here in the States. So I did some planting, and it's always exciting to see the things grow and get a new sense of newness. And so things are good, and new insights as well, with clients and with just the general trend. So it's always good to speak with you about new things and how they're showing up.
Yeah, that is sometimes the most fascinating part, how they show up.
Yeah, or they continue to show up, but in different permutations or connections that show to me there's connections between things that can be understood in different ways or articulated in different ways. I see your cat is running around.
Yeah, I'm being attacked by a cat. So, before we jump into our subject, I just recently, and I mean, this is a topic that has been going on for like forever. And I received a comment, and in that comment, and it was underneath one of our interviews. And in that comment, the person said that we have it all wrong and that aliens are demons. End of
Okay.
story. So, where do you stand? To me, alien and demons are not one and the same. What would you say?
Well, I mean, I just take with the experiences that people are having,
Mhm.
and then there are differences because I've seen demons and then I've seen aliens or interacted with different ones. So I think demons are definitely in the supernatural realm, and they may have a certain quality where certain prayers work for demons, whereas aliens can be corporeal and incorporeal and actually have bodies or not have bodies or shape shift in different ways, and then who are working with humans in underground bases. So I'm just taking it with the experiences that people have. And it seems to me that those who have really black and white views are not like 30-year researchers who've worked with people who've had alien abductions or been in cults and actually worked with people or had experiences of their own. But
Mhm.
I know that there's some Christian people who've had experiences where they applied prayers and their faith, and the abduction stopped. So, and then they would make the assumption that, well, it's all demonic. But really the question is, what is demonic behavior, and what is the energy and drive behind what we call demonic and
Mhm.
predatory? And so in the Bible, it says those who want to kill, steal, and destroy and corrupt. And if they're separated from God, let's say like the fallen angels and all their hybrids or whatever, they're going to have certain qualities of separation of that eternal spirit, so that the bitterness and the jealousy and the theft and the predation are what's left over. And then those behaviors drive certain behaviors towards people who are still connected to the life force. So that's
Mhm.
why you see the parasitism, the manipulation, and the control, and the splitting in what I'm calling the malevolent aliens and those who are deceitful, even on high levels. So to me, it's like really refining, well, what is their energy and what are they doing? What are they trying to hide? And how does that manifest? And then it tells you the quality of what they are. And then it matters not if they're in human or non-human bodies. What matters is how you can deal with it. But I will say that there are Christians who have discovered, I'm learning this all the time, like it's not all black and white, where there would be certain prayers against demons and the adversary, where demons are like disembodied demonic entities, and the adversary, I think, is the accuser. It's also that. But when you're dealing with people in human bodies who are like enemies, then and then there's another form that you use different prayers or different how shall I say it? Because I heard this from Amanda Byes, And when there's, let's say, when there's a familiar spirit that's a human spirit that, let's say, got demonized or didn't go to heaven or the underworld because they're in a satanic ritual abuse family, and then you get them linked in and they follow the bloodline. And this is what you call the iniquity of the familiar spirits linked on in the bloodline. So when those like hang on to you and they act like attached familiar spirit entities, a regular prayer against demons won't work against them and their effect. So then certain prayers and understanding of the true nature of what's present needs to be known and applied so that you can deal with those forces. And I think the same thing goes for aliens and alien abduction and MK Ultra and some of these other things that are not so quite easily defined.
Mm.
So that's
Yeah.
my 2 cents on that one, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. So I told you that, yeah, we just finished the season of sacrifice that starts on 22nd of March and lasts until 1st of May. The unofficial beginning is the 19th of March. And because of that, I revisited the Waco massacre. Yeah,
Mm,
because everything went up in flames on the 19th of April. So that event, like
Oklahoma bombing was April
yeah,
19th,
Oklahoma, but the same
like
day.
our
Yeah.
anniversary. Yeah.
Mhm. And I have to say, yes, David Koresh was a nut job, no doubt about it. But the way they botched that operation, especially the ATF the first day, and then later on the FBI, and sending the negotiator away because they had no more patience for negotiating. And what followed was so horrible.
Yeah.
And it feels to me, like it's a competition between idiots. Who can make the most idiotic decision on this matter? Yeah, and that is the protocol that they followed. And okay, 82 people died, including 23 children. And especially when you know little children are in there, that is not how you act. But okay, so here's one interesting piece that I also didn't know before I revisited that. Do you know that David Koresh was in Israel, that he made a trip to Israel?
Mhm.
Mm? And I guess he had a plan to establish something there, but then they canceled his visa. And he had to fly back to the United States. Anyhow, uh, there in Israel, he had what he says a supernatural event and a chariot with was it seven? If memory serves, and the seven angels were in there in that chariot, and they took him into that chariot, and they flew up and took him out, 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 higher, higher, and higher. And guess where he ended?
Uh,
Orion. Orion.
oh no, you're kidding. Oh God, reptilian headquarters, right? Or Draco headquarters? I don't know. I'm not an astrologer, so but Orion is notorious, right? For well, it's
Yeah.
actually for both. But well, isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
That could bring up a whole different discussion as well about like the Angel Moroni and the originator Joseph Smith of the well, the ones in the United States and Utah, the Mormons, because that was a con job by higher fallen ones. And it manifests later, of course, in the whole cult kind of experience. But in there, it's like the polygamy and the pedophilia, and then the connected with a little bit of the Freemasonry, and then pretty soon it just gets all corrupted. So it begs the question: who are these beings taking them on these astral or whatever trips, and then encouraging them to start some kind of religion or cult that ends in a big loose feed or a disaster, or it corrupts what should be something that is good, like a good community, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, but that community was not very good, I would say. And because he reached a point when, he was convinced that he was the only one who could produce pure children. And therefore, he dissolved the marriages of his followers, and whoever had relations with him was then another wife of him.
Oh God, there we go again. It's always the harem and the
Yeah.
sexual pedophilia bullshit. I mean, why do they keep doing this over and over and over again? You ever wonder, like, what's that about?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even I do not, but even if I entertain the idea, yeah, that he's correct on that part, that he is the only one. Yeah, problem is, 1, 2 generations later, you have total incest.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's by design. I'm telling you, it's by design well, if you ask me, we can call them the higher fallen angels, are the ones that are like higher, more deceitful spiritual beings that are very, very good at spiritual deception. And these are the super dangerous ones, because they don't always appear at first like visions and connections or channelings or spirit guides. They appear wonderful, and they can create wonderful feelings of bliss. And then you only see it down the road of the corruption later of a high level spiritual deception, which is very, very dangerous. And it almost always goes into some weird perverted sexual thing, or with children, or a harem of many women for the one narcissist who's friggin' it's always the same kind of energy. And so that
Yeah.
makes me go
And,
into
and that is why I found that piece of information about Orion so interesting, because I thought, my goodness, um, who knows what really happened there? If he got a kind of a creepy download, because when he returned from that trip, and he also mentioned that angels do not really have wings; they have a Merkaba, and that is a spaceship. So,
interesting.
yeah, okay. And then when he came back from that, experience, he claimed to have a full understanding of the Bible, especially the Revelation. And then he equated himself to the Lamb who is going to open the 7 seals.
Oh,
And the fact that he was 33 at the day of the 19th of April, when everything went to shit, of
oh.
course, enforced his delusion.
Yeah, the reinforcement of a delusion, that's big in spiritual deception. And then the synchronicities of like they'll make it so that the synchronicities reinforce this special identification with the hero or the redeemer or the leader, and then put it all in the synchronicities and the mythical parallels of that myth. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's all a myth, but it seems to be they reinforce that self-delusion through powerful synchronicity, or even like what they'd call in the intelligence community establishing their bona fides, so that they keep a really good cover and everything looks like they are who they are, but they're really not that. It's their cover. So they can have 80% truth and 20% delusion, and that 20% is what creates the what it really is down the road.
Yeah.
But they do have supernatural power. And it's interesting because I remember Barbara Bartholick mentioning this years ago, where it was the Marshall Applewhite cult in San Diego. I think it was San Diego County, in a wealthy neighborhood in 1997, when there was the mass suicide. And that Marshall Applewhite and his partner, Bo and Peep, they called it, it was a couple. And she used to be a nurse. And they would, they were like a cult. And I don't know if it was mostly Christian, or I think it included Christian and an ET type of thing. But he actually had some supernatural manifestations, which some people observed and told Barbie privately long before he did the whole abuse, what do you call it, suicide. And so that's interesting. So not when people say, oh, they're all fakes, a lot of times they're not all fake, and that sometimes there are supernatural or paranormal manifestations with these leaders. And so they can actually have something, and that's why people believe in them. And it could be a good delusion and a good control system, because they really are good at what they do. And always seems to end in some kind of mass suicide. And this reminds me of it was actually a movie I saw on another channel. It was on Peacock TV, and it was called The Sacrament, and it was a documentary, and they might have dramatized it, but it was a similar cult where a guy goes to visit his sister in a spiritual community that it moved from the US to someplace in Northern Africa because it's cheaper and it's easier there to run a community or a cult. And they visit the cult, and they find out that it's run kind of by this creepy guy who's deluded, and ends up that there's some people who want to escape, but they have to keep secrets, and it turns into a mass suicide of 167 people. So it was actually larger than the Koresh suicide. And I think all but a few or two guys
I don't
escaped.
believe that that was a suicide.
What was
Wait,
it? It was a sacrifice.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a sacrifice of some sort, but I think it's encouraged by the delusion of the leader, who thinks at a certain
Yeah.
point they're under, like, oh, they're under attack by the evil forces of the world, that they won't be able to keep their community, and now is the time of the revelation, or the whatever, the great conflict, and they think it's actually better for them to die in whatever they believe in than have this thing be destroyed by the world bankers or whoever. And then they justify this thing, but it always seems to be led by, you know, the narcissistic cult leader, who ends up having sexual relations with more than one, and often accesses the children, or some of the children get abused. And so that's what the movie showed. It was actually a single woman and her daughter that they're the ones that kind of spilled the beans on some of the abuse. And like the younger daughter was mute from the abuse, the effects of the abuse, and then finally told the secrets, and they really wanted to escape, but they weren't able to tell the truth. And then they were like guarded by men with guns. So it was all this incongruent, typical cult. But it turned from something good, that maybe in the early days it was like a traveling ministry that helped people, like older women who were widows, and single women with children, and poor people who were addicts, and then they got into recovery because of their Christian faith. And then all of a sudden it just turns bad in the end by one leader who just seems to get diluted with their own sense of hero worship, and whatever causes that to happen. And I think it's an infection, that, or something maybe that happens over time, like they become more and more hosted, more and more diluted, and then it's always like the sexual abuse and control that powers that delusion and that spiritual dark force. And then it'll end up in some kind of sacrifice of some sort. It's like a MO.
Yeah. Yeah, and David Koresh, he displayed that early on. He was not the leader right from the get-go there on Mount Carmel. There used to be an elderly woman. Her name was Lois, but I forgot her last name, and she was 50 years older than him.
Wow.
Yeah, and he started a relationship with her, and told people that they would bring forth a wonderful miracle child.
Well, kind of like the Abraham and Sarah when she was like
Yeah, exactly. So and then I have my doubts that she was really pregnant because she was already in her 70s. But the story goes like that she miscarried and he dropped her like a hot potato.
Ah, it's so predictable. You know what I mean? Okay, go on.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so right from the get-go, there is something very weird with sexuality going on. And yeah, as you said, it's always the same pattern. Yeah. And what would you say, Eve? What are the warning signs that one might be in a cult?
Wow. Yeah, I think cults, the original, I think the original desire for like a family connection and community is something that's innocent. And that would be a natural good thing to have a community that lives in harmony with the same values, and that you create meaningful relationships like family that everybody needs. Like a human needs for family and love and connection is a good thing. And it seems to me that when people go into cults, a lot of them that have found themselves vulnerable were people who already had some form of family trauma. They might have been raised as a partial orphan, or they had some kind of family system dysfunction, whether it was an alcoholic parents or not feeling connected and valued as a family member, that they could connect and feel loved, so that they just are gravitate towards spiritual groups that will give them that sense of connection and meaning and value. But the original injury was usually caused from a family system or multi-generational trauma to begin with, and then it sets up the vulnerability to keep searching after meaningful relationship and community. But the cults are often led by predators who know the wounds, and so a lot of them, they're wounded themselves, and they take on, I mean, it's a classic narcissistic personality disorder that gets basically diluted with self-importance as the redeemer hero, messiah complex kind of thing. And they use the spirituality as a bypass to reinforce their ego, which is the faults. Let's say if it's narcissistic personality disorder from a psychobabble, they have a false personality ego complex that is on top of a deep root core shame complex trauma, completely injured, wounded child. And so they have to create this false better self through, that's how they survive to deal with their shit or not deal with their shit. And then that just builds on the false ego and their own vulnerabilities. So that tends to create the perfect host for a cult leader. And then they get easily manipulated by real demonic spirits and real fallen angel spirits that can give them supernatural power, and they reinforce the delusions, and then they utilize that power, sometimes real supernatural power in magic, or they twist to make it look like religion, and they're really actually doing a type of black magic. That's what I think.
Hmm.
There's something real to it that makes it why it's so believable and easy to get caught up into it. um, and that there's something real, but it's usually driven by a narcissistic hosted person, or someone who becomes hosted later because they didn't deal with their shit, and they believed basically it was a spiritual bypass of their own unhealed wounds that drew in a lot of wounded people because they're wounded, and they search after that, somebody who's going to give them the answers or appear
Hmm.
like they give them the answers. And it's so sad, because it happens over and over again, and but there's a true need for like real churches and real communities, so you can't blame people who are looking for that kind of connection. But and I think that's the big takeaway with people who've been narcissistically abused or end up in cults, or they came from cult abuse and then end up going from one cult narc abuser of some sort to another, and in the process of thinking that they're healing their wounds by doing spiritual cultivation practices or prayer or doing deliverance, but it wasn't complete because the church didn't, they didn't really know the whole ball of wax with trauma. And there's all this bypass stuff going on that is using religion as a cover and a bypass instead of the real deal. So the real deal has to have, I think, trauma recovery and true discernment and discrimination. They call it spiritual discrimination, spiritual discernment that comes with the real connection of the spirit of truth. And if that doesn't happen, you're going to get a bypass situation or a cult situation or unresolved trauma that just reinforces itself over and over again. And I'm sure, the bypass thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say being in a cult is actually like being in a narcissistic relationship.
Yeah.
It even has, similarities how you are being recruited. um, it usually starts with, what in a narcissistic relationship would be the love bombing phase. Yeah. You are very intelligent. Only a few can see this
Oh, yeah.
truth and fully understand it. And it's only for a few. So you feel chosen. Yeah. And you are so smart because you are following my smartness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then it goes on like that. And once you have been, fully initiated and integrated, then comes the phase where you are being discarded and they couldn't care less about you.
It's
And
terrible.
they can even be harsh and, emotionally very distant and even sometimes violent. And that is exactly what happens in narcissistic relationships as well.
Yeah. I think it goes several steps further when there's a well, let's say the garden variety narcissist who's not, let's say not religious or spiritual. They don't have the wherewithal to maybe manipulate as brilliantly. Of course, it depends on their specialty. So sometimes their specialty is business, where they're like the best used car salesman, for example, or they're a really good CEO, but they're like super manipulative. But I think it's right when you say it's like the initial love bombing where they want to get you in on the deal like very quickly. So they'll come in like, oh, I really love your stuff. You're really wonderful. You're so talented. And, this is what I believe in. And they pull you in suddenly. And it's almost like you can see certain business deals doing this too, where it's run by somebody who wants to come in quickly with the love bombing or the feeling special and get the sale now, right? And try to get them to acquiesce to the terms and conditions of the narcissist and the cult beliefs that go along with that. And then after they've sucked you dry through their predation of the supply, right? Then they'll go through the devaluation and eventual discard phase of basically ripping you off, but taking all your good stuff as part of just what they do because that's who they are. So I could see how these similar dynamics play not just in religious cult systems, but they'll go on with certain businesses as well. And or even with, like if you study like spy tradecraft and how they behave, and over time they create these ways of being that's always some kind of manipulation or finagling in order to justify some agenda that is actually run by questionable sources at the top. Like they're all criminals at the top, and you're like, oh, is this really good? Am I really doing good for my country? When you find out, like, well, never mind. At the top, it's like, oh man, it's all corrupt. So yeah, there is the devaluation and discard, but I found it was Sam Vaknin's research into really understanding the compulsion towards the devaluation and discard. It's actually an unconscious on the, let's say, on the garden variety narcissist personality disorder, where if they had the complex abuse that caused their own splitting to create the narcissistic, let's say, the golden child narcissist, and that golden child maybe was enmeshed by an overbearing mother that made them be what they are instead of just allowing them to be who they are, and then being emotionally neglected, let's say by the father figure, and then over enmeshed by the mother who's controlling and love hate at the same time, because love is always conditional, then that creates the compulsion to individuate and separate almost dramatically, in a mean way, from the mother figure who was the overshadowing, enmeshed, narcissistic, unhealthy mother, right? Who wanted to use the son as her partner because she's not getting what she needs in her primary marital relationship. It's a dysfunctional pattern that happens in families where, the golden child narcissist later gets married and then may have the love bombing, but then they can't help themselves. That once they've had the original, let's say, connection and bonding of intimacy, they're compelled through this love, hate, rage need to just cut you off and get away from you and devalue you to justify cutting you off, because they need to individuate from the mother trigger, which is where they really need to individuate from the enmeshed dysfunctional mother, but then they put that on you as, let's say, the spouse. And so they will, insult you and create all kinds of massive justifications for their absence and their neglect and their devaluation, making you feel absolutely worthless, not even lovable. And then eventually discard you or create the conditions that will actually get the woman to actually want to have an affair, to the point of almost setting them up to have an affair by creating like triangulation, where like inviting male roommates to live with you that you'd be sexually attracted to while they're gone all the time, almost like setting it up. So see these behaviors, but I think in a lot of the garden variety narcissists, they're unconsciously compelled by their own unresolved love hate from the enmeshed dysfunctional mother and the neglectful, complete emotional neglect from a father figure that should have protected and connected with them. So you will never feel truly loved. And so that, when you're with a narcissistic figure, whether it's a cult or individual, when you start, like when you're still, quote, normal and being able to express your real feelings and, let's say, reactions to what they do to you to make you feel absolutely like shit, or when they're insulting you or ignoring you in public, or passive aggressive punishing behaviors in front of people. There's a whole slew of behaviors. And if you say, hey, that was really shitty, that really hurt my feelings when you did that, like you acted like, I wasn't even there, you treat me like I'm an invisible, worthless piece of shit, what's that about? And then they'll say, well, I was just really busy from work, you don't know how hard I'm working, and then blame it all on the need to work in the business, and that's why they have to be gone and abuse you all the time and invite roommates, even though there's enough money to not have to have roommates in the house, but they have to have people there so that they always avoid intimacy, because they have to push you away. And then they have to blame it on you when you start like, wow, that really hurts. How come there's no intimacy here and no connection and communication? And so they'll gaslight you to make it all your fault. And there's something wrong with you because of your history. So this is where the gaslight gets real confusing, because a lot of people who come into these narcissistic relationships or cults, they're already injured from early trauma or family neglect or addictions or sexual abuse or whatever. So they already have maybe a primary wound, but when you're with a narcissist, they exacerbate your wound and then make it like it's all your fault. You're the one with the problem. And then they turn it up a few notches to make you the one with the problem, but they're actually fueling your triggered reactions because they know they can get away with it. So it makes it look like you're the crazy one, right? And that's why it's so hard to get real recovery, because even marriage, I've seen marriage counselors who completely fell for the narcissist and the how they made the spouse look crazy, because when you're with one long enough, what happens is you can't, well, I'm sure you know this, it's not like a mystery. You can't do the normal thing where you're normally able to express yourself as a rational adult who has self-esteem and a sense of conviction and surety of like, yeah, I feel bad when this happens, and when you do that, that's stripped away from you, so that you, in order to get a point across to a narcissist who's deliberately ignoring you, and devaluing you and making you as if you're a worthless piece of shit who's telling a lie when you tell the truth. So you have to speak louder and louder and louder and get maybe more and more dramatic to get a response or to feel heard or to feel valued as a normal human being. So it could set the other person up, the one who's really not the problem, to have to be more and more dramatic and to solve the problem, or let's say in a marriage counseling session. And so you might see this over dramatic, chaotic kind of thing play out in a marriage counseling session, but it's because the narcissistically abused partner gets conditioned to never be able to truly express or communicate or get their needs met or be heard and understood. So they never have the feeling of being vindicated or that you're even real. So you have to yell louder and louder and louder and get more and more dramatic to even get the least amount of something done or to get your needs met. So you're left to be overly dramatic or angry or have to manipulate to get your needs met or get your needs met outside the marriage, because you know you'll never be able to get your true needs met or to be valued and respected at all as a human being. So it can set you off into being like, looking like you're the crazy one when you're the partner or in a cult. So this is it, it drives actually more and more dysfunctional behavior until the original, thing is actually seen for what it is by somebody who's really good at facilitating, let's say, a marriage couple. But with a cult kind of situation, there's like one leader, right? And that leader is like boss, so that you can't come in with a board of directors to basically do something more, I don't want to say democratic, but there needs to be more than one witness to, let's say, an issue. And this is even in the Bible, where they say when someone is clearly, quote, sinning, who's in the church, for example. I know that sounds silly, but you need two or more witnesses to be able to address the problem person.
Yeah, but you know what? I know for sure that Jehovah's Witnesses, they apply this even to child abuse. So, and now I ask you, what child has two witnesses to their sexual abuse? They even go as far as, if they do not call the police, yeah, they manage it within the congregation.
That's bad.
That's bad. And they even do not shy away from, let's say, when there is preaching service going from door to door, to put that child with a molester in one group. That the two of them have to go together. Even that is happening. So, this rule of having two witnesses is good and fine, but sometimes, many, many people don't have any witnesses to their assault, and
then they're not believed.
Yeah.
That's classic for sexual abuse. And you could also extend that to what happens with alien abduction, where oftentimes there's not another witness, or actually, if there is, they switch them off, or they're too afraid to say anything because they don't want to go against the grain of this is not a reality. If I say anything, they're going to think I'm crazy, so I'm just going to put up and shut up and not say anything at all. But it's really the enablers that's so sick. I've seen that in family systems and churches where they don't talk about it, and it's like, the covert no talk rule of the predator and the abuser, and that goes on when people feel too powerless to actually create an escape plan. And I think this happened in old Appalachian Southern Baptist, where there's multi-generational sexual abuse, even in and out of the church. And if they didn't have a way to get away, like if women couldn't make money and you're in a mountain village that's far away and you can't get support and you can't get believed, you don't have that option. So it's kind of like you have to go back into denial of the system that you're in, and that which creates enabling, like women who are manipulators and enablers of pedophiles, for example. Although it could be reversed, it could be the other way around, but it creates this enabling that happens through sometimes denial, but sometimes the addictions will support the enabling behavior and the numbing of the awareness of what's happening with the children. So it's like human psychology is like, if we feel like, I think if we feel like we can't survive on our own, we won't be able to face the full shocking truth of what is, because if you feel like you can't get away, your full awareness won't be on board, because it can create a splitting or a death or physical death, like in children. Like this is why we develop like dissociative identity disorder from early trauma. And so really people need to know and feel like that there is a solution, that there's a safety net of someone who cares, where you can escape the prison. And I think what's really scary, I mean, this is a theme that has come up that I've been thinking about lately, and this happens kind of in general in the world when we talk about, well, everybody's awakening now, right? Awakening to what's happening in the world, or awakening to the reality of maybe sexual abuse in the churches or cults, or awakening to the reality of this alien invasive force that has been working and creating hybrids and invading the government and people and taking over, and awakening to the fact that this is real. There needs to be a disclosure. Okay. But what's more, let's say, I don't want to say scary, but what often happens, and I believe this is, it's kind of like the Matrix movie, and as a parallel, when you wake up, let's say you're in occupied territory of the enemy. And that's a very shocking reality to know how total and pervasive this really is. And it's not really what we thought the problem was. Maybe we think it's only one group of people, for example, or maybe this leaders of this country, or this or that. And it's like, this is much more pervasive. And if you wake up in occupied territory of the enemy, our whole strategy of freedom and winning a war is a totally different psychological operation or spiritual operation. So this is where, like, if you think, oh, you could just fight your enemy and, speak your truth and do these political advocacy lobby groups and get political about it, like, good luck with that. I'm not saying that it doesn't help to educate. It is just that we're in occupied territory of the enemy already. We're under delusion after delusion, or non-lucidity of the reality of what we're really in. So it's kind of like, I don't know, I feel that when we wake up and we realize, oh, wait a minute, let's say you're in marriage with a narcissist and you're part of the church or something, and like your whole life revolves around this church and this individual, and then you find out they're a friggin' pedophile and all your finances are tied up with all them and the cult, and you're like, oh shit, then what do you do now? So you have to like plan and strategize your escape over a period of time by being like the perfect spy operative, where you don't know at all that they know that they know. And then you have to make your plans accordingly. And this could take time. It could take time to escape. And you have to do it without the predator knowing that right? Because they're really good at knowing when and they're real psychic. They have their psychic supernatural woo-woo shit. Like if they're really good, and this happens in cults and like SRA. So this is where, like, okay, when you awaken, it's almost like you can't let them know what you're knowing and you're feeling, because you know what they are. And you can't apply the rules of justice and goodness and equality with these people. They will not respect you. Therefore, you can't do compassionate communication with them like you would in a marriage counseling session. Like, good luck with that. No, they're going to fucking kill you, or they get rid of you, they'll target you. So this is where it takes a real strategy of like, okay, now that you're awakened and you're in this state and you can barely maintain the shock of the awareness and the emotional reaction of the reality of like, oh my God, now what do I do? And what do I need to do and in order to build my strength and my power to make basically become somewhat invisible, and you appear like you're doing something else, and then you just go and do it and you take the ball and run with it while you're invisible to get away from the problem. So it's like, I think that we need to devise different strategies of liberation and even conflict, for example, that it may, like when they say when you're with a narcissist, who especially who's dangerous, you don't like call out the narcissist. Good luck with that, right? What they're gonna do, especially if they have more power than you and they have the purse strings, and you just end up homeless the next day without any money and without a car. And so you have to do things strategically and kind of eat crow, or what they call it, be humble, and not truly express the reality of what you're feeling and what you really know when you're in the presence of what's going on, the true predators. And so this is where, a whole different strategy must be undertaken. And I think it's a development of understanding how to deal with what we're dealing with in the world. Like, this is not just one country against another, or a typical war, or friggin' marriage, argument. This is when you realize what you're in, we have to develop strategies and building our own internal resources to have the power to be able to deal with what's present, and literally find other ways so that they don't hammer you in targeting. So this is what I deal with, and I'm sure you've seen this over and over in the people you interview. They aware of something, and then as a result of their whistleblowing or their truth telling or what they discovered, bam, they end up a targeted individual. They can die, they can get sick, they can end up like disappearing for a while, like what happened to so and so, who was like really, on YouTube for a while, and boom, they're shadow banned, they're gone, they're targeted. So that's what happens. So the statistics of what people think is the truth and the driving narratives of the majority is not really what it is. And I think, it's the smaller voices that tend to know what's happening. And it's, how can we stay alive and stay balanced and empowered to continue bringing truth and living truth as we understand it, without getting killed, without getting targeted, without having, like the rape victim who can't tell the truth, and how do we do this? Knowing that they behave in certain ways. Like, and I think this is, I've told this to someone else, but they didn't understand. It was another show where I talked about like how the great enlightening moment that really shifted my life and my recovery was knowing and understanding what narcissistic abuse is, and why the codependency narcissistic abuse thing creates such a problem in true recovery until we really understand the depths of what that is, especially if your end is the codependent end and you've been victimized by these personality types that may have had a supernatural thing on top of it, that unless we truly understand the nature of that and the nature of our own wounds, we can't recover. And so we could be blaming ourselves and self-doubting and gaslighting ourselves ad infinitum until, I heard this from someone else. And then I finally figured out what it was about. And then it wasn't until I understood that reality to finally understand and have insight on how to create change and build my own power back up again. And it took, for me, it took not only the understanding of the classic psychology and the newer psychologies coming up with narcissistic abuse, transpersonal, and then Buddhist meditation, and then back with complex PTSD, understanding how to recover from that and how to work with your own spiritual resources to get online with your true power. And that takes, integrated approach. which is not really going on in classical psychology or even classical religion per se, unless they really have the supernatural power of the Holy Spirit and the understanding of being like a trauma therapist at the same time.
But
That's my
how would you discern if they have the true power of the Holy Spirit? Maybe they are working with an entity as well that
that could happen.
parades around as the Holy Spirit.
Well, that's where it takes you know, self connection with your
Mm.
own heart and your spirit, and then just praying and asking for the Most High to come through to actually show you whatever the truth is in any situation, and then getting the broad understanding of what's being shown to you, like in your dreams and visions. And then I think it's good when we have people to reflect with, like a short peer group of a few people who are on the same level, where you can kind of reflect back like dreams or insights, or you really need to kind of talk about something that happened and needing to get clear on, okay, was it me overreacting or was this like really going on? And I need to know to get clarity to find out, am I overreacting here? Okay, so
Mm.
self-doubt happens when if you've been abused, where someone says, oh, well, you're just too sensitive, you're always making a mole out of a mountain out of a molehill or whatever. So sometimes it takes reflecting with someone who can have a neutral approach, and then reflect on you. Well, no, you didn't overreact there, because if I was in that situation, I think I would have felt the same way, or maybe more. So sometimes we just need to reflect, with one
Yeah.
another.
So I would also say that, yeah, one of the tenets that you are in a cult is usually, yeah, we have the only answer, the only true answer. Yeah, that is us. Or the other ones, yeah, the church over there. Or that's basically how every religion operates as well. Yeah, we have the real truth. The other ones across the street don't go there. Yeah. And what you will also find is that after a while, they try to eliminate your existing relationships with the outside world. Yeah, so that
Yeah, the
that is
isolation.
all bad for you. Do not listen to these toxic people. It's all poison, what they talk about. And before you can count to three, your family ties have been severed, and you no longer are in contact with your friends and what have you.
Oh,
Another thing is that usually, if you have really questions, not just to make some stink, yeah, an honest question, usually they do not get answered, or they look at you like you still don't know. and and of course, criticism is especially criticism, criticizing the leader. That is a no, 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 no,
oh
no.
yeah, yeah, I know. That happens in some of the Eastern, like guru, like there's the Eastern spiritual traditions and the Western. And the Western tends to be more individualistic, following their own voice, or maybe the Christian, Judeo-Christian thing, whereas the East may have a different approach of more of the Hindu Vedanta Buddhist, and where they honor the guru. But it's good to have, I think, a perspective of both, and seeing the psychology of both cultures and how best to apply what's needed for your unique. This is how I would apply, like, Oriental medicine, for example. I use as an analogy that each person may have a different pulse and something going on in their system, where a standard RX or prescription may not work for a whole group of people. It takes an individualized practitioner who can read your pulse, assess what's going on with all the different meridians, and then have a special formula or treatment for your unique presentation based on who you are and how you deal with, let's say, the five elements. And this is how I think we need to apply therapeutic psychological recovery from trauma, as well as a spiritual, how we get in touch with the truth, not only inside, but outside, so that we're able to apply the best for who we are and how we've adapted to our culture and for our own weaknesses. So it's not a standard RX for everyone. Like if we would say to someone who was, let's say, narcissistic or self-deluded, say, well, only listen to your own heart. Well, you know what, where that's going to go. They're going to be, it will encourage their self-delusion of the false ego. So sometimes we need someone wiser than ourselves to say, well, this is what I'm seeing, and maybe what you would consider this. And sometimes we're blind to our own until we have someone else to do this. But the only way that I think that we can truly receive that is when that other person has a type of wisdom and compassion that can give you that information at the right place at the right time, so that it's received in the spirit that it needs to be received to take root, so that seed sprouts. So for example, like maybe one personality needs the tough love, or another person needs the gentleness and the kindness and the nurture and the safety to finally receive what they need to create and formulate and kind of let those changes take place in our nest of safety. And then some people like need to be fucking hit over the head and say, hey, stop that shit, So that's how I see it. There's no I don't think there's no one formula for
No.
a whole. It depends on who we are and our culture, and how we apply the truth of our spiritual connection, inner and outer.
Mm.
So I know that's a
Yeah,
mouthful.
and especially when it comes to the point, where they um, tell you how to dress and how to wear your hair, you can bet your bottom dollar that you are in a cult. And I would say that, yeah, follow your gut feeling, because a lot of people have a gut feeling that something is wrong. Yeah. And if you find yourself researching narcissism and cults,
Then you had it.
yeah,
Then you
that is a good sign that you have a problem there, because otherwise you wouldn't be on that path. Yeah, trying to understand what is really going on here.
I think it's good to be curious, and curiosity is a good thing. That
Mm.
shows that there's something working to want to find the truth. And yeah, that's a sign for sure that if we keep finding ourselves watching videos after videos, and it could be because it still hasn't worked itself out. But I believe, based on what I've seen, it's internal and personal, like with our own family histories, but it's also very macrocosmic. World system got a problem. You know what I mean? So it's not just individual. This goes on, and it has been allowed to go on, which is a whole other understanding of how that works in larger systems of belief in business and government and all that, that keeps the system going in bigger ways. So maybe that's for the next hour or something, depending
Yeah,
on.
exactly. Because we have already finished our first hour. Can you believe that? That to me, it just flew by. Whoosh.
I start to cough. That means I'm talking too much and I need to.
Okay, so that was the public hour with Eve Lorgen, and we will see the patrons on the other side. Bye bye.